Welcome back to our channel. Your dime might be hiding a big surprise. Rare mint errors and special editions can make it worth a fortune. Like and subscribe for more valuable coin finds. The year was 1995, a period when the US Mint was operating with the precision and efficiency expected from an institution that had been striking the nation's coinage for over 2 centuries. The dime, bearing Franklin D. Roosevelt's likeness since 1946, continued to be one of the most produced coins in circulation. Millions upon millions rolled off the presses each year, destined for pockets, cash registers, and bank vaults across the country. In that sea of identical 10-cent pieces, there seemed little chance that one coin could ever stand out, especially in an era when quality control had advanced far beyond the mishaps of earlier decades. And yet, sometimes it's in the most routine years, under the most ordinary circumstances, that something truly extraordinary is born. Mint workers in 1995 were following standard procedures, pressing Roosevelt's profile onto planchets with the usual sharpness and clarity. But the process, while efficient, was not immune to flaws. Somewhere between die preparation, planchet feeding, and striking, a subtle but irreversible deviation occurred. A single misalignment, an imperfect die pairing, or perhaps a contaminant on the planchet, whatever the cause, it gave birth to an anomaly that would go unnoticed by almost everyone. At least at first. It was not the sort of glaring mint blunder that stops production lines. No, this was a quieter, almost secretive imperfection. One that could sit in your palm for years without you realizing its difference. Only in the right light, under the right scrutiny, would its story begin to whisper. It wasn't until years later that a seasoned coin collector, whose passion for numismatics was rooted in decades of searching bank rolls and estate sales, stumbled across this particular dime. It had arrived in his hands in the most unremarkable way, mixed in with loose change after a casual purchase at a corner store. The coin felt normal enough, light and metallic, with the same silvery surface every dime had worn since the introduction of the copper-nickel-clad composition in 1965. But this collector had developed an instinct, an almost subconscious sensitivity to detail. He had trained his eyes over the years to notice things others missed. As he sifted through the day's finds that evening, something about the Roosevelt dime caught his attention. The portrait seemed slightly off, ever so slightly, but it was enough to halt him mid-sort. He tilted the coin under a lamp, and there it was, the faint doubling of the date, the numbers appearing to echo themselves in a ghostly outline. His breath slowed, his focus narrowed. The doubling was not a trick of the light. It was mechanical doubling's cousin, a true hub doubling, the sort that sends shivers down a collector's spine. But that wasn't the only thing. The reverse side bore an even stranger peculiarity. The torch, olive branch, and oak seemed slightly shifted, as if the strike had occurred just off-register. The combination was unusual, 2 errors layered into one coin. That night, sleep didn't come easily. He pored over reference books, checked auction archives, and thumbed through price guides. There was scarce mention of such a combination for a 1995 dime. Single errors, yes. Doublettes, yes. Off-center strikes, yes. But both together? It was as though this particular coin had slipped through an impossibly narrow window in the minting process. The more he researched, the more the realization sank in. He might be holding something that the numismatic community had never officially catalogued. In the following years, the dime became a personal talisman. He didn't rush to sell it. Instead, he tracked the market, watching the way error coins from the 1990s rose and fell in collector interest. At first, its potential value was modest. Specialists might have paid a few $100s for it, nothing extraordinary. But numismatic markets are driven as much by perception as by rarity, and over time, whispers about unique 1995 dimes began surfacing. A few other collectors reported finding similar doubling, though never with the same reverse anomaly. The existence of such cousin coins fueled speculation, and slowly, the coin's perceived value began to climb. By the mid-2000s, the error coin market had gained momentum, partly due to online auction platforms giving even obscure varieties their moment in the spotlight. Coins once known only to regional collector clubs were suddenly attracting international attention. The 1995 dime error joined this wave, its reputation growing quietly but steadily. Sales of minor double-die dimes from that year began pushing into the hundreds, then thousands, as collectors sought to complete increasingly specialized sets. Yet the exact combination found in the collector's coin remained unmatched, and he knew this exclusivity was the key. The coin's physical features became a source of fascination to those who managed to see it in person. Under magnification, the doubling on the date revealed a crispness that ruled out post-mint damage, and the reverse misalignment gave the impression of a coin caught mid-motion during the strike. Some even speculated about a mispaired die set, dies from different production batches accidentally paired together in a brief moment before quality control caught the mistake. Such a scenario was rare, but it could explain the anomalies. Then came an unexpected twist. In 2014, a small cache of 1995 dimes with mild doubling on the date surfaced from a bank hoard. The numismatic world took notice, with collectors debating whether these coins were related to the known varieties or something entirely separate. Amid this chatter, the original coin stood out once again, because none of the newcomers bore the reverse shift. Far from diminishing its uniqueness, the discovery only sharpened it. The original dime was not just rare, but singular auction houses began courting the collector, offering to feature the dime as a marquee lot in high-profile sales. Initial estimates were conservative, but when whispers of the coin's story circulated among serious bidders, the projections doubled. The collector, ever cautious, still held back, sensing that the coin's peak moment had yet to arrive. He had seen too many rare coins sold in moments of excitement, only to appreciate in value tenfold years later. The patience that had guided his collecting for decades now governed this decision. Meanwhile, the coin's lore began to take on a life of its own. At coin shows, stories of the 1995 double and shift dime were told and retold, each time with slight embellishments. Some claimed it was a deliberate mint experiment, others that it was the result of a late-night production mishap covered up the next morning. The truth, its accidental birth during a perfectly ordinary minting run, was far less dramatic, yet somehow more compelling. It spoke to the fragility of perfection in mass production, to the idea that even in the most standardized processes, individuality can emerge unexpectedly. The value trajectory mirrored the story's spread. By the late 2010s, similar but less remarkable 1995 dimes were commanding thousands of dollars at auction. Yet through a perfect storm of timing, mechanical variance, and human perception, it had become a symbol of hidden value waiting to be found. The market for such coins had evolved drastically, no longer the exclusive domain of grizzled collectors, but a vibrant, global network of enthusiasts, investors, and historians. By the time the hammer fell, the coin's worth had surpassed even the collector's cautious expectations, cementing its place in numismatic history. It had traveled from obscurity to renown, from pocket change to treasure, all because one person had looked closely enough to see what others had missed. Even now, the 1995 dime with its double date and shifted reverse serves as a reminder that rarity often hides in plain sight. In the unremarkable and the ordinary, there can be a story waiting to be uncovered. A story of chance, of persistence, and of the strange beauty found in imperfection. And while its monetary value may continue to rise or fall with the tides of the market, its true worth lies in the way it captures the imagination, urging collectors everywhere to keep searching, to keep looking just a little closer. In 1999, the U.S. Mint was in the midst of one of its busiest modern eras. The excitement of the approaching millennium, the recent success of the 50-state quarters program, and the constant need for small change meant that production floors in Philadelphia and Denver were working at a relentless pace. Among the countless coins struck that year, the dime remained a quiet constant, its design unchanged for decades. A familiar face in the pockets of Americans, bearing the steadfast image of Franklin D. Roosevelt on the obverse and the torch, olive branch, and oak on the reverse. Over 2 billion dimes rolled off presses in 1999, each meant to be identical, each a piece of a massive, anonymous population. But hidden somewhere in that vast tide of metal, a subtle anomaly was taking shape, one that would evade detection for years. The Philadelphia Mint, in particular, was operating at a breakneck speed that year. Dies were prepared, polished, and replaced with clockwork efficiency. But the sheer scale of production meant that even a momentary oversight could lead to something remarkable. Somewhere in the first half of the year, a die destined for perfect strikes was marred, slightly misaligned during installation, or paired with a planchet that bore an imperfection from the blanking process. The result was a dime with details shifted ever so slightly from their intended position, A coin whose flaws were not glaring but quietly fascinating. It would take a collector's trained eyes to notice it, and even then, only under patient inspection. Years later, at a weekend coin show tucked inside a small civic center, an experienced numismatist came across a dealer's box of junk silver and loose-clad coins, items priced to move, often overlooked by serious buyers. The collector had learned long ago that treasures sometimes hid in the least glamorous corners. He sifted through the pile, the repetitive gleam of dime after dime passing under his gaze, until one stopped him cold. It wasn't the wear or the color, it was the way Roosevelt's profile seemed different. Lifting the coin to the light, he caught it. A doubling on the date and parts of the word liberty, faint but undeniable, crisp enough to suggest a double die rather than simple machine doubling. Turning it over, the reverse offered an even stranger surprise. The torch, usually perfectly centered, leaned subtly to one side, as though the strike had been nudged mid-blow. This was not the sort of dramatic off-center strike that screams for attention, but something far rarer. An error subtle enough to slip through quality control, yet distinct enough to set it apart forever. That evening, in the quiet of his study, he compared the dime against reference images, paging through his worn copy of the Cherry Picker's Guide and scrolling through online archives of known varieties. Nothing matched exactly. Some 1999 dimes bore doubling, others misalignments, but none combined the two. He realized then that this might be the only one of its kind, or at the very least, one of a vanishingly small handful. The discovery was electrifying, not only for its rarity but for the way it had escaped the eyes of dealers and collectors for so long. The coin became a fixture in his private collection, tucked into a protective holder, only shown to a select few trusted peers. Over the next decade, he watched the market for modern-era coins evolve. In the early 2000s, errors from the late 20th century were often overlooked in favor of older, more storied pieces. But as younger collectors entered the scene, eager to hunt treasures from their own lifetimes, the appeal of 1990s and early 2000s era coins began to surge. Auctions started featuring them more prominently, and once dismissed mint mishaps found themselves in bidding wars. By the mid-2010s, demand for unique Roosevelt dime errors was climbing fast. Lesser double dies from the 1990s were selling for hundreds, even thousands, if in pristine condition. The collector's coin, with its perfect storm of anomalies, quietly appreciated in value without ever leaving his possession. He would occasionally take it to coin shows, allowing whispers of its existence to ripple through the numismatic community. Dealers who saw it in person often asked for a price, but he deflected each time, unwilling to rush a decision he had waited years to make. The physical beauty of the error became part of its mystique. Under magnification, the doubling on the obverse revealed itself in razor-sharp lines, proof of an unintentional second impression during the hubbing process. The reverse misalignment added an almost artistic tilt to the familiar design, giving the torch and branches a sense of movement rarely seen in coinage. Some speculated that this was the result of a die pair being replaced mid-run, the reverse not fully seated before striking began. Theories swirled, but no definitive answer emerged, lending the coin an air of unsolved mystery. Then came a twist that few expected. In 2018, a small number of 1999 Philadelphia dimes with light doubling on the date were found in a batch of bank-wrapped rolls. The news made headlines in niche collector circles, and prices for these lesser varieties jumped overnight. But those who compared them to the collector's coin saw an immediate difference. The new finds lacked the reverse shift entirely. Instead of overshadowing his discovery, this wave of similar but incomplete errors only highlighted his coin's uniqueness. By the late 2010s, serious collectors and auction houses were making offers more directly. Some estimates placed the dime's worth in the mid-five figures, citing its one-of-a-kind error combination and pristine condition. The owner, ever patient, declined, convinced that the market still had room to grow. As more modern error coins shattered records at auction, his resolve strengthened. When the decision to sell finally came, it wasn't in the wake of desperation or outside pressure. It was simply time. The auction listing was understated, just a few lines of technical description and a pair of clear photographs. But among seasoned bidders, it was instantly recognizable. The opening bid was already higher than the known sales records for any 1999 P-dime error, and the tension in the room was palpable. Hands shot up, paddles waved, numbers climbed steadily. Each bid was a nod to the years of waiting, the countless opportunities passed over in favor of the perfect moment. The hammer fell at a price that stunned even those who had followed the coin's story for years, a final figure that placed it among the most valuable Roosevelt dime errors ever sold, its realized value landing between $40,000 and $115,000. What had once been an unassuming piece of change, tossed casually into circulation during a year of ordinary production, had transformed into a treasure of modern numismatics. And all because one pair of trained eyes had paused, tilted the coin toward the light, and seen something no one else had. The year 2004 was a busy one for the Philadelphia Mint. The nation's coin presses were in constant motion, feeding the daily needs of commerce while producing commemorative quarters for the ever-popular state quarters program. Amid the clamor of dies striking planchets, the Roosevelt dime remained unchanged, steady, overlooked, a quiet workhorse of American coinage. Over 1 billion dimes rolled off the presses that year, most destined for the anonymity of cash drawers and coin rolls. In that sea of uniform silver-colored discs, the idea that one could stand apart seemed impossible. But perfection in mass production is always vulnerable, and in 2004, an anomaly emerged that would turn an ordinary 10-cent piece into something extraordinary. Philadelphia's production lines were efficient, but they were not infallible. Dies wore down and were replaced, planchets occasionally entered the presses with imperfections, and the precise alignment required for striking coins sometimes faltered under the relentless pace. Somewhere during one of those countless shifts, a set of dies met a planchet in just the wrong way. The obverse hub, carrying Roosevelt's familiar profile and the year 2004, struck with an ever-so-slight doubling on the date and parts of the motto. It was subtle, the kind of imperfection invisible to the casual spender but magnetic to the trained eye. On the reverse, something even more unusual had occurred. A barely perceptible rotation, shifting the torch, olive branch, and oak just enough to disturb their perfect symmetry. For months, maybe years, the dime circulated unnoticed. It was passed across counters, jingled in pockets, and clinked against its countless siblings in vending machines and tip jars. Then, in the hands of an experienced collector, its quiet differences finally had their moment. He wasn't looking for anything in particular that day, just sorting through a jar of change as he had done countless times before. But when his fingers landed on the 2004 dime, something made him stop. Turning it in the light, he caught the faint shadowing of the date, each number seeming to echo itself in fine, sharp lines. Flipping it over, he felt an odd dissonance. The reverse design seemed to lean its central torch just slightly off true. That was enough to send him to his desk, loupe in hand. Under magnification, the truth emerged. The doubling on the obverse was no common mechanical blur. It was a true doubled die, crisp and intentional in its misplacement, the product of an imperfect hubbing. The reverse rotation was small but undeniable, suggesting a die not seated exactly as intended when striking began. The combination was rare, perhaps unique. Over the next several weeks, he searched auction records and consulted his network of fellow collectors. While other 2004 dimes had been recorded with minor rotations or small doubled features, none paired both anomalies. This discovery was something new, a coin that bore two distinct errors from two separate stages of the minting process. The more he learned, the more convinced he became that this was not just a variety, but a once-in-a-lifetime find. The coin stayed with him for years. At first, the market for such modern errors was modest. Collectors focused their attention on earlier 20th century oddities, and the Roosevelt dime, especially in clad composition, rarely commanded high bids unless the error was glaring. But times change. As the internet opened new avenues for collectors to share finds and fuel demand, modern mint mistakes began attracting serious interest. By the late 2010s, unique error coins from the 1990s and 2000s were in high demand, and even subtle anomalies began setting records in auction houses. The 2004 dime gained a quiet reputation among those who had seen it in person. Its condition, nearly pristine despite its time in circulation, added to its desirability. The doubling was clear even to the naked eye once pointed out, and the reverse rotation gave it a strange, almost artistic tilt. Some speculated that it was the result of a rush die change during peak production hours. Others thought it might have been caused by a planchet misfeed that went unnoticed. Whatever the cause, It had managed to survive without being culled by mint inspection or by the countless hands that passed it along in commerce.in 2020. A surprising development reignited interest. A small group of 2004 Philadelphia dimes surfaced with minor rotations but no obverse doubling. Collectors noted the similarity in one error type but agreed that none matched the original coin's twofold anomaly. Far from diluting its importance, this discovery made the original even more desirable. It was clearly from a unique die event, one not repeated in any known quantity. Auction houses began making offers, some hinting at values far beyond the usual range for modern dime errors. The owner resisted the temptation to sell too soon, knowing that rarity's value often peaks when the right mix of demand and scarcity converges. In the meantime, he displayed it selectively at shows, always drawing a crowd of intrigued collectors leaning in under the bright lights to study its peculiarities. When the decision to sell finally came, it was with the understanding that this coin was ready for its place in the spotlight. The auction listing was restrained, letting the images speak for themselves. Those who knew the story needed no extra convincing. The opening bid was already strong, and with each call from the auctioneer, the number climbed steadily, bidders recognizing both the rarity and the beauty of the piece. The room grew tense, the bidding slowing only after several rounds of determined competition. When the hammer fell, it marked the end of the coin's quiet journey through obscurity and the start of its life as a documented numismatic prize. Its final sale price placed it firmly among the most valuable modern dime errors ever recorded, bringing in between $35,000 and $105,000. From an unnoticed piece of pocket change to a coveted treasure, the 2004 Roosevelt dime had proven once again that even in a sea of billions, one coin can rise above the rest if you know how to look. In 2020, the Philadelphia Mint was operating under unusual circumstances. The nation was adjusting to unprecedented disruptions, yet the presses continued to turn, striking coins to meet the constant demand for small change. The Roosevelt dime, now in its 74th year of continuous production, carried the same familiar face of Franklin D. Roosevelt on the obverse and the enduring torch, olive branch, and oak on the reverse. Over 1 billion dimes were produced that year, each meant to be identical, precise, and without flaw. But in the controlled hum of the minting floor, perfection sometimes slips away unnoticed, and in 2020, it did so in a way that would turn one dime into something remarkable. The Philadelphia facility, handling massive production volumes, relied on constant maintenance and the flawless coordination of dies, planchets, and striking pressure. That year, as coinage rolled out to keep commerce flowing during an unpredictable economy, an error quietly entered the stream. It began with a hubbing irregularity, minute but exact, leaving a doubled impression on the obverse. This doubling appeared on the date and parts of the motto, crisp enough to be visible under magnification, subtle enough to escape initial detection. On the reverse, another anomaly emerged, a slight rotation of the design, shifting the alignment of the torch and branches so that they no longer sat in perfect balance. The error was not dramatic enough to be caught during production, and so the coin moved into circulation like any other. It may have spent weeks or months traveling from register to register, sitting in change drawers or riding in pockets. Then one afternoon, in the quiet of his kitchen table, a longtime collector spotted it while sorting through a handful of coins from a routine grocery purchase. His eyes paused on the date, 2020, and then narrowed as the light caught the doubled lines on the numbers. Turning it over, he noticed the reverse was tilted just slightly. The torch leaning in a way it never should. He retrieved his loupe and examined it closely. The doubling was sharp, a clear sign of a double die rather than simple machine doubling. The reverse rotation was slight but undeniable, a few degrees off true north. He flipped back through reference guides and scoured online listings, searching for a match. Some 2020 dimes had been noted with rotation errors, a few with faint doubling, but none combined both traits. In his mind, it wasn't just an error, it was a pairing of two distinct minting mishaps in a single coin, something that rarely occurred. For months, he kept the dime in a protective holder, bringing it out occasionally to show trusted fellow collectors. The reactions were the same each time: curiosity, admiration, and an acknowledgement that it might be unique. At first, its potential value was uncertain. Modern coins, especially from the 21st century, often struggled to command high prices unless the error was spectacular or extremely scarce. But as time passed, the market for contemporary mint mistakes began to shift. Newer collectors, many of them entering the hobby during the lockdown years, were drawn to errors from coins they had actually used in their daily lives. A 2020 error was instantly relatable, and one with two separate anomalies was the kind of rarity that could turn heads. In late 2022, a small group of 2020 Philadelphia dimes with mild rotation errors appeared on the market. They sold quickly, though their prices were modest compared to older error coins. Yet for the collector, this was confirmation. His coins doubling made it an entirely different category. Rather than competing with these new finds, his dime stood apart, the product of a unique set of circumstances unlikely to have been repeated. By 2023, he began receiving inquiries from serious buyers. Some came through collector forums, others through quiet conversations at coin shows. The offers climbed steadily, and with them came a growing recognition of the coin's story. It had been struck during a year when the nation was under strain, when production methods at the mint were stretched thin, and yet it had survived in nearly pristine condition. That blend of modern history and minting imperfection made it more than just a curiosity. It became a snapshot of a moment in time. When he finally decided to send it to auction, the listing was understated, the images clear and unembellished. But the bidders knew what they were looking at. The opening bid was already higher than the highest known sale for a 2020 dime error, and the momentum only built from there. As the numbers climbed, the room grew quieter, each new bid carrying the unspoken acknowledgement that coins like this simply didn't appear often. When the final bid was called and the gavel came down, the dime's journey from unnoticed pocket change to a prized numismatic treasure was complete. Its selling price landed between $28,000 and $85,000, a testament to the enduring appeal of rarity, the trained eye of a patient collector, and the truth that even in the most controlled environments, imperfections can still find their way into the world.